I thought maybe if she's coming in. Okay, so maybe we have to come. Is that what you're thinking? Oh, sorry, and Holly's over there. You want to do that after the conversation and before we serve the cocoa tea? Not good?
Okay. So we're commencing the second part of this program of meetings, which sits very much in the framework of gatherings and passages, which is the title given for this ongoing collaboration with Sourgrass, a curatorial collective from the Caribbean, with whom Kunstinstituut Melly is truly delighted to be presenting this new work, new exhibition of solo work by Jasmine Thomas-Girvan. For those who are joining us through our live stream, we've just had a beautiful sunny autumn walk procession up to the garden of the Master of Fine Arts Piet Zwart program, where a number of students welcomed us and invited us to enjoy a beautiful spread of food. We also there enjoyed a libation that was given to us by Mevrouw Marian Markelo, who is also with us, who is a senior most Winti priestess here in the Netherlands. So for this part of the program, we're continuing these conversations of connections by being joined really across continents with our very special guest who's joining us via internet connection, Olive Senior, poet laureate of Jamaica, among many titles, author of a book of poetry called Gardening in the Caribbean, which has given us much of the inspiration for today's program. I will hand over to Jasmine and to Holly and to Annalie to continue this conversation. And in so doing, I think I'll just make one more note, which is to remark on how enjoyable it was to spend time in the garden and to remark on the very impressive way in which the garden at the Piet Zwart Institute has been opened as a pedagogic space in and of its own right, and the philosophy that underpins the garden as a space of artistic learning and artistic practice that moves beyond the studio, that moves beyond the idea that one artist has one studio and authors one work, but a garden as a mingling space of creative potential. And so with that note, I'm very pleased to hand over. And we'll proceed for about another 40 minutes, and then we'll have a service of cocoa tea at any point that can organically arise. And I look forward to hearing more about the history and the significance of this cocoa tea, as well as to any questions, answers, comments, interventions at any point throughout the proceedings. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivian. It is really wonderful to welcome you all. And very, very nice to have you here with us, Olive. Yes. So welcome to today's session, which is laying a table for the ancestors. And we are so thankful that so many of you have come out to connect with us in this way. My name is Holly Bino, and I'm here with Annalie Davis. And together we co-founded the curatorial agency called Sourgrass, which has formed a multi-year collaboration with Melly And our first engagement is, of course, producing Jasmine's wonderful exhibition, Bathed in Sacred Fire. Sourgrass seeks to work with artists and creative practitioners from the Caribbean and across its diaspora to build relationships with museums, cultural institutions, collectors, publishers, biennials, and both private and public entities. And we're very, very interested in alternative arts pedagogy, building discursive programming, and connecting with global worldviews and mythoi, bringing to life affinities and parallels with the Caribbean. We think that Sourgrass functions as a decolonial body and as a bridge to activate cultural manifestations of seeding, cross-pollination, germination, cultivation, and harvest. And again, this first project is going to be part of a 3-year expansion where we're able to really dig down, go deep into the relationships and the parallels that exist between the Caribbean space and the Netherlands.
Thank you, Holly. We're of course very pleased to share this special time with all of you and to have this opportunity to be in conversation with 2 amazing Jamaican women. Jasmine Thomas-Girvan is based in Trinidad and Tobago, and as you know, is showing her work upstairs in the solo exhibition, her first solo exhibition in Europe, Bathed in Sacred Fire. Olive Senior is the prize-winning author of 18 books of poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and children's literature. She is the recipient of numerous awards and honors and has been recognized as a writer, educator, researcher, and literary luminary across the world. Olive is Jamaica's Poet Laureate, so we are very honored to have her. And today she joins us from Toronto in Canada. Welcome to you both, Olive, and to Jasmine. Welcome to our audience here with us today and to those of you joining remotely from around the world. Before we go into begin our questions, Olive, I was hoping that you could read Gourd for us. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm glad to hear you have a sunny day there because I'm having a very dark, rainy day in Toronto. But it's wonderful to share this occasion with you and with Jasmine. So thank you for inviting me. I'll read the poem Gourd, but I think I should explain 2 Jamaican words in it. Paki is one, which Jasmine might have talked about because that's the most common word for the half gourd that's used for just about everything. But then there's tuk-tuk. I don't know if you've wondered about that word, but a tuk-tuk is a very special gourd. It's made from a very large oval calabash, and the guts is taken out through a very small hole at the top because it's a water carrier. It's what, like in my childhood, this was a farmer's water bottle. They put it in a sling, put it over their backs, took it to their fields, and they used a corn cob as a stopper because people didn't have corks. And why is it called a tuk-tuk? Because if you try to pour liquid out of a very small hole from a big container, it's going to go tuk, 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 tuk. So I just thought I'd explain that to you. And I'll read Gourd. Hollowed, dried calabash, humble tuk-tuk, how simple you look. But what lies beneath that crusty exterior? Such stories they tell. They say, O Paki, in your youth, before history, as cosmic container, you ordered divination, ritual sounds, incantations. You are tomb, you are womb, you are heavenly home, the birthplace of life here on earth. Yet broken, they say, you caused the first flood. Indiscretion could release from inside you again the scorpion of darkness that once covered the world. The cosmic snake, it is said, strains to hold you together, for what chaos would ensue if heaven and earth parted. They say there are those who have been taught certain secrets, how to harness the power of your magical enclosure by the ordering of sound, a gift from Orehu, the spirit of water, who brought the first calabash and the stones for the ritual, who taught how to fashion the heavenly rattle, the sacred baraka that can summon the spirits and resound across the abyss like the Ungans, a son, or the shamans, maraca. Yet, hollowed, dried, calabash, humble, tuk-tuk, we've walked far from that water, from those mystical shores. If all we can manage is to rattle our stones, our beads, or our bones in your dried out container in Shack Shack or Maraca, will our voices be heard? If we dance to your rhythm, knock knock on your skin, will we hear from within, no matter how faintly, your wholeness resound? Hollowed, dried, calabash, humble, tuk-tuk, how simple you look.
Thank you, Olive. Beautiful.
Thanks.
To kick off our conversation today, it's been a really rewarding collaboration working with Jasmine over the last year to co-develop a framework for Bathed in Sacred Fire. Our intersection and crossing, well, my intersection and crossing happened with Jasmine about 9 years ago when I was producing issue 4 of ARC magazine. And until now, my appreciation and awe has grown thinking about the ways in which you have integrated very complex histories, folklore, spirituality, and play into your nimble and profound works. And this has impacted my sensibilities, and I use this as an invitation to share how you and Olive connected. What was that spark? And Olive, I would also like to hear from you on your evolving and growing creation, words, and stories, and how they intersect or resonate with Jasmine's visual language. Yeah, so tell us your story.
Thanks, Holly. I'm so happy to see you.
Right here.
The Olive's influence on my work. Okay, sorry. Olive's influence on my work started long before I knew who she was. Because of my interest in history and culture, I often used a publication called Jamaica Journal. And later on, I discovered that Olive was the editor for a long time of Jamaica Journal. And the spark was after I read Over the Roofs of the World, and then of course Gardening in the Tropics. And the synergy for me is how Olive, over the years, the taproots of her craft are rooted in a very profound curiosity about our history and culture. And that is also a motivation, inspiration for me and my work. So it started with the investigation of the history through Jamaica Journal and the research, and then of course, reading her poetry in those 2 books. Yeah.
And Olive?
Yeah, well, I met the work before I met the artist and fell totally in love with it, because it's Jasmine's, everything that I've seen by Jasmine has spoken to me. I think she and I are in many ways on the same sort of wavelength. And in terms of I see myself as a literary archaeologist. That's how I've always positioned myself as a writer and a researcher, because I grew up not knowing too much about my own culture. I grew up in the colonial era. I have a poem called Colonial Girls' School, which said we got a fantastically good education, but there was nothing about us at all. And my life, my entire life's journey as a person and a writer has been to dig deep, to discover what is there to know about us as Caribbean people. And therefore, the word ground is one I use a lot in talking about that journey, because ground, especially for a Jamaican, has a lot of resonance. We talk, if a Jamaican tells you if you're told you're grounded as a Jamaican, it's a sign of authenticity, that you have dug into the ground, you're digging into the ground, you're deeply rooted. And it has all kinds of religious and other overtones, like Rastafarians talk about a groundation as a gathering. And I know that Jasmine in her work is also digging very deep into that ground. So I think we're sharing that kind of common space, that Caribbean space, and expressing it in different ways. But I think even the ways we express it are very similar, because in that video of Jasmine's that I watched, that was done by your institute, I think, I was fascinated by her using the term that, or saying that she sees her works as triggers of experience, because that's exactly how I also see my work, my poetry, my what have you. I want it to trigger, I'm using my experience, what I have learned, to trigger a response to the reader in the same way that she's expecting a response from the viewer. So there's that kind of dynamic quality to the work. I'm writing to a reader always. And my feeling is that Jasmine is presenting her creations to the viewer always. So I won't go on, but I really think that one of the exciting things for me is to find workers in other areas of the arts who respond to my poetry or my work, and which also enables me to respond to their work. To me, it's just the most satisfying experience that I have. So thank you.
Thanks, Olive. Olive's poem, Ode to Pablo Neruda, is one that has influenced several of Jasmine's works, including several in the show upstairs, namely, To the Ones I Cannot Name, I Love You, and The Spirit Necklace, which is on the table at one of the place settings in the work titled Dreaming Backwards. Jasmine, I wanted you to talk a little bit about your process of dreaming, thinking, and making, and your long-term engagement with this poem as a point of departure or source of inspiration for these works. And then following that, Olive, if you would tell us a little bit about this lengthy and rich poem, Ode to Pablo Neruda, which I believe you wrote for the BBC and which is so richly layered and evocative of the creative process.
Thank you.
Ode to Pablo Neruda for me speaks about the materiality. There is a conversation on the web, the thread, but more than anything, I connect with it because it speaks about the creative process and the difficulties, the precarity of it, the joy in the process. And I think that the specifics of it, when I read that work, it referred to the history in terms of the slave trade, in terms of indigenous life and culture. And because Olive is just so, she unleashes the imagination. And so you read that and it is deeply grounded in fact, but then you just take off on flights of fantasy and fancy, and it stretches you. And so I find delight in that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll just say a bit about this poem, Ode to Pablo Neruda. It's a very special one for me. It's one I've talked about in various lectures and so on, because I wrote it at a time, it was an unlocking for me at a really, really bad time in my life. I had left Jamaica, drifted around, ended up in Canada, and then had a book published in Canada, and then I went silent, mainly because people said to me, when are you going to write about Canada? And that just stopped me in my tracks, okay, for years. And anyway, I had this commission from the BBC to write a poem in honor of a dead poet. It was part of a series they were doing, and it was a 15-minute recording, so that's pretty long. And just, you know, I decided on Pablo Neruda, but I couldn't write a word. I was just totally locked. And then I went back to reading Pablo Neruda. And if you're familiar with his work, he has a lot of encouragement for other poets. You know, it says, oh, stop the nonsense. You can write about anything, including thread. And I literally took that thread. And that's what the point, you know, and I've hung on to that ever since as a way of dealing with unlocking creativity, but also knowing that you are part of a culture, you're part of a tradition, you're not alone out there as a creative artist. And the other thing I'm exploring a lot in this poem using that thread. But one of the things that it made me realize is that the poet is a kind of shaman, in that we still have to go through that process. And I'm sure any artist, you have to, in a way, die to be reborn. You have to be transformed in that sacred fire that Jasmine is talking about in order to speak, not just for yourself, but for a community. And so I'm really glad that this poem had resonance for Jasmine in her practice, because I think it's a very significant one for me as well in my practice. And it's speaking about art and the nature of art and creativity and all of those things. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All of you said something very fascinating there about archaeology, and I'm trying to digest. So I'll come back to that. But Jasmine, your work draws inspiration from many sources. And one of the observations made while viewing the show is your attention to scale, labor, histories, the natural world. And these intersections have informed decisions about language, intent, and embodiment, i.e. how we locate our bodies in the work. And Olive, similarly, your work has engaged with thematics around the impacts of colonization on the collective psyche and on the bodies of people in the region and in the African diaspora. And both of you are using some kind of like magical realism and other historical anchors to speak about the impacts of race, class, power. What kind of spaces are you hoping to cultivate during the encounters with your work? What kinds of spaces?
Well, a line comes to mind. First, the knot of yourself you have to unravel. And I imagine a space of introspection, healing, imagining, exploration, personally and collectively.
I'm not sure I quite understand the question. Is it my own personal space, or what kind of space do I want to create for the reader?
Yeah, for the reader, for the people who are encountering like this dense history, this beautiful language, all of the different threads coming together. What do you hope to evoke? And I know it could be a little bit of a reductive question because space is not singular in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I just gave an address to the Edamame College, which is the art school in Jamaica, and I talked about something I've discovered fairly recently, but I think it's so important. It's something called ground truth, which is a term surveyors use, like the map and the territory are not the same. So to know the land, you must walk it. Or as Zora Neale Hurston said, you must go there to know there. And I'm thinking that what we're doing, what we're taught in school is a kind of truth handed down to us in our school books, you know, whatever. It's colonial truth. And what we as artists in spaces like the Caribbean have to do is to walk the walk. We have to discover ground truth. And that is a truth that is not necessarily written down. It's there in the oral culture. It's there in the ground. It's there among the country people I grew up among, waiting to be extracted. And that is what I mean by archaeology, the digging, you know, the space. I have, in the same way that Jasmine has talked about my work helping her, I have been helped greatly by the scholars who came at the time of independence in these countries in the post-colonial moment and did so much research in every field, you know, in history, in archaeology, and you name it, music, dance, whatever, language, which have informed me in my work. And I, in turn, taking all that knowledge, and also the fact that I grew up in rural Jamaica among, you know, country people, the oral culture is very much a part of what shaped me. But I'm taking what I have learned, presenting it in that space to the reader. And I'm trying to do it in a very nuanced way. But it's giving back something and then saying to my reader, you go and do your groundwork, go and explore, you know, you and explore your ground truth. You go and find out more about the cultures that we inhabit. So I want to trigger that kind of investigation in anybody, or a response. You know, culture isn't static. I don't want to just present something. In the same way, I am energized by seeing Jasmine's work because of the transformative quality. It's you know, she's taking something and making it, turning it into something else, what you might call magical realism, or to me, it's like, look, Salvador Dali, where his work stays in your memory because it is so challenging and provocative. And it's a combination of the real and the imaginary, you know, and I think that's what Jasmine is doing as well, and what I'm trying to do.
Thank you. So I'm wondering if you can both speak about your repeated reference to Anansi in your poems, Olive, and in your objects, Jasmine, the power of that mythology which originates from the African continent, and share how that folklore informs your writing and your making, including the meticulous creation of the web, the fragility of the thread, the string of the kite, the thread Anansi weaves for the webbing and the telling of stories.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to go? Yeah, I mean, I don't even think in terms of Anansi as such, although I grew up with Anansi stories, you know, it's embedded in our psyches. And it's, the Anansi stories really are about how the weak can overcome the strong by cunning. But I'm more interested, I think, in the whole idea of the spider weaving from her gut everything that we need. I think I'm more interested in the idea of transforming something into something else. And the fact that so much of what we do is bound up with thread, you know, as a symbol, as a metaphor for connectivities and so on and so forth. So it's not, I mean, Anansi is part of who I am and so on, but I don't really think too much about Anansi, except of late, I've been looking again at Anansi stories to see what are they really telling us. And one of the things that has struck me is how we need to reread these stories in a realistic vein, in the vein of history, because so many of these stories, our folklore, is about food scarcity and about people quarreling and fighting over food. And when we're told Anansi stories, we take it at face value. Anansi even cheats his wife and she ran out of a banana. You know, it's really a horrible in some ways. But I think what it was telling us, what our ancestors were using these stories to tell us, and what we have missed so far is the reality of their lives And food scarcity, hunger, famine was very much a part of the plantation history that we haven't talked about. So I'm at the moment going back, looking at Anansi stories and folklore in terms of what we've missed, because these stories are told to us as entertainment. And really, if we dig deep, if we run them to ground, I think there's a lot more to be extracted from them.
Sure.
Nothing to add. Okay. Thank you for that, Olive. We have a few moments where we can open up to the floor. It's such a great opportunity to have Jasmine and Olive here. So if anyone has a question that they would like to put forward to either Olive or Jasmine, there's a microphone in the room that Vivian has, so please do so. And it's a informal space. It doesn't have to feel too heavy.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but Mevrouw Markelo, I couldn't help but notice, but you were really in agreement many times. I'd love to know maybe what Anansi means to you, or in the Netherlands, or even to many of the comments that we've heard.
The stories of Anansi, I grew up with the stories of Anansi. And also my grandson, my book presents are always the books with the stories of Anansi. Because I want to teach my grandson a certain type of morality through the Anansi stories. But what Sister Olive told us, the time, it is now the time to take a look at Anansi from a colonial perspective, and also decolonialize Anansi. That's also important to do that, because we have the people has taught us to see Anansi just for fun, but Anansi is more than fun for the African community on earth. That's why I think that we have to focus on Anansi from another perspective. And Sister Olive and Sister Jasmine, you all make me feel very good, very nice. I am very happy to hear all the things that you were telling us. I feel very blessed to be here with you.
I feel blessed to be here too.
Anyone else?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm very, very happy to be here also. My name is Alidia, come from Aruba, and I feel that connection with both, with everybody. There is a sense of not only connection, I guess, also our colleagues here from Aruba representing another island, sister island. And I feel like it's in the air. It's in the air we breathe, and also how each one person is processing in their own time and their own values and norms and generations. I say that because I'm feeling that not only for myself, but I feel that with a lot of people around me. And I saw a small part of the documentary, and I really, really enjoyed how you process your work, and with the delicacy and a lot of honor and respect. And that is something that I feel that we have to take good care of that, so the generations to come will also understand that, and they will also keep it alive, because it's something that is very necessary in our times, these unpredictable times we live in. But I feel that this connection, going back to our ancestors and making these connections stronger, and also connect with the other islands, the other, like it's one big community, it's one big connection, it's one big process. But it's beautiful because that is about, for example, in Aruba, we have also a lot of different nationalities, and but in different rhythms, in different times, and that also brings sometimes difficulties and frictions, and it's sometimes it makes it so difficult, and so you don't have a grasp of it. But I feel that to connect with our sister islands and our the communities all together, we need to move forward now with that. And that's how I feel. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm in the right place. Thank you.
Hi, Jasmine. Thank you. And also to Olive Senior for the words. I wanted to go back and think of the exhibition and some of the artworks that are presented as part of it, and that I saw you very carefully assemble each of them. Many of the sculptures involve a number of pieces that come together slowly until they come into shape. And I wanted to ask you, how do you think of some of the symbols or some of the recurring elements in your work? Because it seems that there's a lot of symbolic issues that either feathers or birds or hearts have, and of course movement within the works. And I wanted to see if you could just help us unpack a little bit some of that use of recurring features. Even the details of how the hands are pointing or touching their fingers, there seems to be, each work seems to have a whole world embedded into the grammar, visual grammar that you use. So if you could speak a little bit about the symbolism, about some of the elements that recur, some of the images that recur, such as the bird, such as specific positions of the hands, and the uses, for example, of the feather, or the appearance of the heart as an element also that is done with natural materials, but also very beautifully crafted to be obviously human made. So just to get a sense and to go back to your exhibition and read again or interpret again some of the works with a knowledge that we can have because we have your presence.
Yeah. Thank you, Sophia. I was trained as a metalsmith, and so the way that I approach the work is always with an eye for detail. And I took a very conscious decision to reframe what we deem as precious. When I started out, precious was precious metals, gems, and so on. And so I wanted for the materials that I use to be specific to the location where I come from, the Caribbean, and to use the exercise using those materials to reframe what we deem as precious. And the symbolism, because of my interest in indigenous spirituality, I'm trying to learn more about African spirituality. I try to investigate that through the materials and through the symbols. Yeah. And they are recurring. I live in a space where I wake up to birdsong. Birds are a big part of my life. And from very early, the hummingbird, for instance, which is a national bird of Jamaica, was a symbol that I use constantly. And that when I moved to Trinidad, of course, that whole awareness of species and so on expanded. And also it links back to the original indigenous spirituality and how they use materials in terms of the feathers were like their jewels. And so the materials reinforce for me that investigation. Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Sumaya. Thank you both so much. Yeah, for your works and for the conversation. Jasmine, I wanted to ask a little bit about, you mentioned the visual vocabulary, but also the literary vocabulary, and yeah, what has that meant for you in the process of the space in the exhibition place upstairs, and yeah, what that relation between the literary and the visual in this exhibition has looked like for you. And the second question on the table, if you could, yeah, speak a little bit more about the setting. And I noticed that there were parts of the garden that you also brought back. Yeah, and that connection for you, what did you choose to bring back and what that sparked?
The literature. So I find that there are some works like Olive's, like Octavio Paz, and many other authors that when you read it, it resonates. And so those two quotes that are up there, I encountered them many years ago. And for me, it actually very carefully articulates the necessity, the yearning to journey backwards, to delve. It reinforces the curiosity of subsumed histories that basically we need to exhume. And I'm not very good with language. So when I do read something that is potent and resonant, it often inspires a work. I also spend a lot of time in nature and in my garden. And so we actually, when we first thought of this collaboration, in my head, I thought we would actually be creating a huge feast for everybody, but that was not possible. And so for me, the table is a very important part of how we connect as a community, as families. It's something that we have kind of veered away from because it's inconvenient. And when Danny proposed a collaboration, I was very excited by it. And as you can see, we did lay some things on the table prior to going to the garden, and I couldn't help myself. I had to, yeah, make that connection, yeah, with the materials there. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Any more questions? Should we just move to the to Olive to do the pandemic? So Olive, maybe as we kind of begin to wrap up this part of the program, if you could read something from the pandemic poems, maybe just tell us a little bit about that, because we are living in very unusual times. So it would be lovely to have a reading from that series. Thank you. You're muted, I think.
Sorry. This is my pandemic poems book, pandemic poems first wave, optimistically, because I thought, okay, there's going to be one wave. I started writing these poems last year as a way of keeping sane, quite frankly. And I sent them out into the world via social media, and they came back to me. And this was a thread that connected me to the world and took me back to the origins of poetry as the way the tribe gathered around the fire and shared news and information. And the thing is, although I've done this book, which was about last year, I'm still writing pandemic poems and sending them out on Twitter and Facebook. And I guess there will be, I don't know, pandemic poems, whatever wave that is going to be. And so the poems charted the first few months of the pandemic. This one, they're alphabet poems because I was using the language that was thrown up by the pandemic, and I've continued that. And they're in order in which they're written. So it's really a record of the times we went through. But again, I was taking very complex information and trying to create, well, poetry is brief. So I was trying to retell this information in a different way, but also I wanted to elicit a response at the end from the reader. I wanted the reader to sit up and think or whatever. But so I'll read you. The poems are also about what was happening in the world at large and how the pandemic transformed our thinking about race, equality, all kinds of things, how it exposed the inequalities in the world. And of course, the George Floyd killing was an important point. And I listened to the last 8 minutes of the tape of that, wrote a poem called B for Breathe, which I won't read, but that really shook me. And the next day I had to go into the garden. In my case, I live in the city, there's a little park, a beautiful little wild park near to me. And I went and I wrote this poem, S for Simple. Tuning out, greeted by dive-bombing, red-winged blackbird on nest duty, guarding this little bit of wild in the heart of the city. Ducks in the pond, turtles on a rock, woods resounding with bird song, life suddenly reduced to simple. Our world of sorrow has forced us to close our door, but there is this other world out there, forever open, carrying on as before.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think we're at the point in the program now where we can make offerings to the table. I'll start because you did S and I wanted to do T. I was kind of nervous to travel here because I hadn't been on a plane for so long. And then I've been so rejuvenated by the experience of being here. T for touch. Though skin hunger is real, we are told the need for touch biological, hardwired in us. How long after we leave lockdown will the fear of contagion keep us starving ourselves of touch? And I just wanted to share that because today is the opposite of that, right? We're here, we're not starving, we're nurturing ourselves with Jasmine's work and Olive's words. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Holly.
I'd like to make an offering. And I'd also like to give a great thank you to Mother Earth, to Danny for welcoming us into the garden last week, and for this connection that I've always had to nature, to the ground beneath my feet, and to the things that grow, to the ways in which they talk, communicate, give life, energy, health to us. My offering is some tobacco. A master plant, I don't like that word, master. So today, in the spirit of rejuvenation, in the spirit of cleansing, in the spirit of healing, in the spirit of giving something that is aromatic, something that is deeply ceremonial, and something that comes with a legacy of healing and integration. I give this to the ancestors as a way for us to move forward with pure hearts, as a way for us to transmute all of this dense energy, and as a gift for them to also acknowledge us. Ashe.
Thank you. I think maybe some people may have brought offerings. You're so welcome to put those forward in whatever form that may take.
Ancestors, I invite you to come and join us at this day to bring health to us, to give us wisdom, to give us knowledge, to give us strength to overcome everything in life. Give us the blessing we need. We want to make connection with you. A connection that will take us in our lives in light, in wisdom, in courage, in everything we need. That we made a connection with the past, yesterday, and tomorrow. Be our guides, ancestors. I offer you rice from the Volta region, from Ghana, Ewe rice, natural rice. I offer you with love and respect.
Thank you. Thank you. Cocoa tea.
just giving space for processing. And a big thank you to Melly for welcoming us into this family of committed cultural workers who are doing the hard work to renegotiate our space, our position, our being. Many thanks to Danny and all of the students at the Piet Zwart for beginning to sow the seeds of collaboration with Sourgrass and with this space. And we really are looking forward to nurturing and harvesting whatever materials, manner, essence that is to come for us in the future. And to the great grandmothers, to Olive and to Marianne, thank you for sharing your eldership and for fostering this connection and creating a safe and sacred space for us to commune and to be.
Thanks, Holly. For those of you who may not know, Jasmine's show is going to be here at Melly until March of 2022, and Sourgrass will return in the fall of 2022 and 2023 to bring more goodness from the Caribbean to share with all of you. Thank you to our audience members who joined remotely. To those of you who came out in person this afternoon, thank you. Thank you, of course, Jasmine and Olive. Have a good evening and a good rest of the weekend, because we may be finishing the remote part. And then we can now share our cocoa tea. Olive, so many blessings. We're so grateful.
Thank you.
So much.
I'm grateful, Lord. Yeah, my day lit up.
Great.
With spirit. Thank you so much for sharing it with me, and enjoy the rest of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we can now have some cocoa tea.
Deliciousness. Yes, take up the tap, take up the tap. Well, I mean, cocoa tea has been used, consumed within our culture in very particular ways. From my experience, you use it to nourish. We also consume it during wakes. Wakes are a part of the homecoming. So when somebody transitions, it would be the thing that one creates in a very, very big pot, like what you see in front of us. And families come together to share stories, to reminisce, to remember, to do that recall. I'm not sure if Jasmine and or Annalie has a different experience around the cocoa tea. But this one is made with a couple of things that are really particular, including allspice, hard spice, any cinnamon in it? Cinnamon, and the tonka bean, which is and nutmeg, and all of them brought from Trinidad. And the tonka bean is probably the thing that might be the most exotic material.
Unfamiliar here.
In that it's not exported widely, and
It's like vanilla essence.
yes, it is
like another
aromatic, strong, and just beautiful.
And the cocoa out of Trinidad, there's a really beautiful bean, the Trinitario. In some cases, some of those cocoa farms or plantations were providing the flavoring cocoa for the Cadbury estate in the UK. So really like potent, beautiful cocoa beans. And it's mixed here with coconut milk. And yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it is really good.